2 years ago, I buried my wife. I stood in the pouring rain as her coffin disappeared beneath the ground. I watched strangers throw flowers onto the casket while I couldn't even bring myself to move. Everyone kept telling me the same thing. Time heals. They're wrong. Time doesn't heal. It just teaches you how to live with a wound that never closes. For 2 years, every morning started the same way. I'd wake up, forget she was gone, and then remember all over again. Her side of the bed stayed empty. Her coffee mug stayed in the cabinet. I couldn't bring myself to throw away her jacket. It still hung beside the front door, exactly where she'd left it. My name is Michael. I'm 38 years old, and until one rainy Tuesday night, I believed my wife was dead. It was just after 9:30 p.m. The weather forecast had warned about heavy storms. Rain slammed against the windows hard enough to shake the glass. I was halfway through an old movie I wasn't really watching when someone knocked. 3 slow knocks. Not loud, not urgent. Just knock, knock, knock. Nobody ever came to my house, especially not that late. I looked through the peephole. At first, and I couldn't breathe. A woman stood on my porch. Her dark hair was soaked from the rain. She wore a gray coat, one I'd seen hundreds of times before. My heart started pounding. "No," I whispered. "That's impossible." I opened the door. She looked directly into my eyes. Then she smiled. The exact same smile I'd dreamed about for the last 2 years. "Hi, Michael." Her voice was calm, soft, familiar. "It's me." Every logical part of my brain screamed that this couldn't be real. I'd buried her. I'd signed the death certificate. I'd stood at her funeral. Yet the woman standing 3 feet away looked exactly like Emily. Not similar. Not close. Exactly. Same eyes, same scar above her left eyebrow. Same tiny dimple when she smiled. Then she said something no stranger could possibly know. "You still never fixed the loose step on the porch." I froze, because she was right. Emily had complained about that step for years, and I never fixed it. I couldn't move. Every instinct told me to slam the door shut, to call the police, to run. But I didn't. I just stood there, staring. The woman tilted her head the same way Emily always did whenever she thought I was overreacting. "Michael," she said softly, "are you going to leave me standing out here?" I swallowed hard. "I watched you die." The words barely came out. She didn't answer. Instead, she glanced at the old wooden porch. "The third step is still loose," she smiled. "I told you 100 times someone was going to trip on it." A chill ran down my spine. No one else knew that. Not because it was some huge secret, but because it was one of those tiny things that only existed inside a marriage. I stepped aside, without thinking. She walked into the house, and somehow, she knew exactly where everything was. She hung her coat on the same hook she had always used. She slipped off her shoes without looking. Then she walked straight into the kitchen. "I hope you finally replaced that terrible coffee maker." I followed her in silence. She opened the cabinet, reached for a mug, stopped. Her smile faded. "My mug," she whispered. It was still there, exactly where I'd left it. She gently ran her fingers across the chipped ceramic. "You kept it." I couldn't answer. She looked at me. There were tears in her eyes. "So did you." I grabbed my phone. "Who are you?" She looked confused. "What do you mean?" "My wife is dead." She stared at me for several seconds. Then she quietly asked, "Who told you that?" I laughed. Not because anything was funny, because nothing else made sense. "I buried you." "No." She shook her head. "You buried someone else." I immediately dialed 911. The dispatcher answered. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. "I think—" I paused. "I think someone broke into my house." The woman didn't react. She simply stood there, calm, watching me. The dispatcher asked if I was in danger. I looked at her again. She wasn't holding a weapon. She wasn't threatening me. She looked heartbroken. I hung up before giving my address. What was I supposed to say? "The dead woman in my kitchen is making coffee?" Nobody would believe me. Hell, I didn't believe me. Then she asked a question that made my blood run cold. "How's Charlie?" I froze. Charlie, my golden retriever. He had died 8 years ago, long before the accident, long before Emily supposedly died. Only the two of us ever talked about him anymore. He used to sleep right there. She pointed to the corner of the living room. Every single night, she smiled. Remember how he'd steal your socks? I couldn't breathe. Every memory, every detail was perfect. There was only one problem. Charlie had already been gone for years before Emily's funeral. Anyone pretending to be her could have learned recent details. Maybe from social media, maybe from old friends. But Charlie, that memory belonged to no one else. Then something happened. Something so small, I almost missed it. She walked past the hallway mirror. For just a second, she looked at her own reflection, and she seemed surprised, not frightened, not emotional, surprised, almost as if she hadn't seen her own face in a very long time. I didn't sleep that night. Neither did she. She sat on the couch with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. I stayed in the armchair across from her. Neither of us trusted the silence. Around 3 in the morning, she looked at me. I know what you're thinking. I shook my head. No, you don't. You think I'm lying. I stared into her eyes. I think that's the only explanation that makes sense. She nodded slowly. If I were you, I'd think the same thing. As the sun came up, I made coffee. She smiled. You still put too much sugar in it. I almost dropped the mug. She was right. Emily used to tease me about that all the time. But then, something changed. She picked up her cup with her left hand. Emily had always been right-handed, always. She wrote with her right hand. She painted with her right hand. She even wore her watch on her left wrist because she hated writing while wearing it. This woman reached for everything with her left. It was subtle, almost invisible. But once I noticed it, I couldn't stop seeing it. I decided to test her. What was the name of the restaurant where we had our first date? She smiled immediately. Antonio's. Correct. What did I order? You ordered steak. Correct again. What dessert did we share? She laughed. The chocolate lava cake you pretended you didn't want. Perfect. Every answer. Perfect. Then I asked one more question. What song was playing when I proposed? She hesitated, just for a second. She looked down. I don't remember. Emily would have remembered. She loved that song. She made us dance to it every anniversary. I excused myself and walked into the garage. I needed air. My hands were shaking, inside an old toolbox. I found the folder I hadn't opened in 2 years. Emily's death certificate, the police report, the autopsy summary, the funeral documents. Everything was exactly where I'd left it. I spread the papers across the workbench. Then one sentence caught my attention. A sentence I'd somehow ignored all this time. Identification confirmed using available evidence. Available evidence? Not conclusive evidence. I kept reading. The body had been severely damaged in the crash. Visual identification had not been possible. Dental records had been incomplete. DNA confirmation had taken several days. I frowned. I had never seen the DNA report itself, only the final confirmation. Why? Just then my phone rang. It was Detective Harris, the lead investigator from 2 years ago. I hadn't spoken to him since the funeral. Michael, his voice sounded tense. I got your message. I need to ask you something. What? Was Emily's identification ever questioned? Silence. A long silence. Finally he sighed. Why are you asking me that? I looked toward the house. She was standing by the living room window, watching me. I whispered. I think she's here. Another long silence. Then Detective Harris said something that made my stomach drop. Stay where you are. What? Don't let her leave. What are you talking about? I'm on my way. The line went dead. 20 minutes later, a black SUV pulled into my driveway. But Detective Harris wasn't alone. 2 people in dark suits stepped out behind him. Neither of them looked like police. One of them wore an earpiece. The other carried a thin black folder. They walked toward my front door, as if they already knew exactly who was inside. The black SUV stopped just a few feet from my porch. Detective Harris stepped out first. He looked older than I remembered, more tired. Behind him came a man in a dark suit, then a woman carrying a black leather folder. Neither of them wore a badge. Neither of them introduced themselves. The man looked directly at me. Michael Carter? I nodded. Where is she? I didn't answer. Who are you? The woman spoke calmly. We're with the federal government. No agency, no names, just the federal government. Something about the way she said it made my stomach tighten. Emily stepped into the hallway. The moment she saw them, the color drained from her face. She whispered one word. No. The man took one slow step forward. We've been looking for you. She grabbed my arm. Michael, don't let them take me. I looked back and forth between them. What the hell is happening? Nobody answered. Detective Harris finally broke the silence. Michael, please move away from her. I stared at him. You told me she was dead. His eyes dropped to the floor. I told you what I was authorized to tell you. The room went completely silent. Authorized? What did that even mean? The woman opened the black folder. She slid several photographs across the kitchen table. I picked them up. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Security camera images. Emily. Different cities, different clothes, different dates. Over the last 2 years, she had been alive the entire time. I looked at her. She didn't deny it. I can explain. Her voice trembled, but before she could continue, the man interrupted. No, it's time he hears the truth. Emily's expression changed instantly. Don't. The man ignored her. Your wife disappeared voluntarily. My head snapped toward him. What? She entered protective custody. I looked back at Emily. She slowly closed her eyes. Tears rolled down her face. I never wanted this, she whispered. I slammed my hand on the table. Protective custody? You expect me to believe that? You let me bury someone else? Nobody spoke. For several long seconds. The only sound in the room was the rain outside. Finally, Detective Harris looked at me. The woman buried 2 years ago was never your wife. I felt my knees weaken. Everything around me seemed to blur. If that's true, I whispered, who did I bury? No one answered, not immediately. Instead, the woman in the suit closed the folder. She looked directly into my eyes. The answer to that question is exactly why your life is now in danger. Every instinct told me to run, but before I could say another word, a loud crash exploded through the front window. Glass shattered across the living room. Emily screamed. Someone outside fired another shot. The federal agents immediately pulled their weapons. Down! The man grabbed my shoulder and threw me behind the kitchen island. Another bullet ripped through the wall. The lights went out. Darkness. Complete darkness. Then, I heard a voice outside. A man's voice. Cold, calm, and terrifying. She was never supposed to come back. The room exploded into chaos. The agents returned fire. Glass covered the floor. I crawled toward the hallway, trying to make sense of what was happening. Emily grabbed my hand. Michael, listen to me. We don't have much time. Another gunshot echoed outside. She looked me straight in the eyes. Everything they're telling you is true. I never died. I disappeared. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Why? She took a shaky breath. 3 years ago, I discovered something I was never supposed to see. She explained that she worked as an accountant for a logistics company. At first, it looked like an ordinary business. But hidden inside thousands of financial transactions was a network laundering millions of dollars through shell companies. She reported it to a federal investigator she trusted. Within 48 hours, 2 people connected to the case had disappeared. One of them was found dead. The other was never found. They told me I had 2 choices, Emily said. Disappear or become the next victim. So I agreed. They created a new identity. They moved me across the country. And they told everyone I loved that I was dead. I stared at her. You let me bury someone else. Tears rolled down her face. I didn't have a choice. If they thought you knew the truth, they would have killed you too. Before I could answer, Detective Harris rushed into the room. They're breaking through the back. The agents moved into position. One of them handed me a bulletproof vest. Stay behind us. For several minutes, all I could hear were sirens, shouting, and distant gunfire. Then, silence. An officer stepped inside. "It's over. They're in custody." The man who had ordered the attack was arrested less than a mile away. His organization had been under investigation for years. Emily's testimony was the final piece prosecutors needed to dismantle the entire operation. Months later, the trial ended. Dozens of convictions followed. The Witness Protection Program officially released Emily from federal protection. For the first time in 2 years, she was finally free. Life didn't magically return to normal. How could it? I had spent 2 years mourning someone who had been alive. She had spent 2 years watching her old life disappear without being able to tell anyone the truth. Trust doesn't come back overnight. Neither does love. We started over, slowly, awkwardly, one conversation at a time. One morning, we sat together on the front porch, the same porch where she had knocked on my door months earlier. I looked at the loose third step. Finally, I fixed it. Emily laughed. "You actually did it." I smiled for the first time in what felt like years. Then I asked the question that had haunted me from the very beginning. "Was there ever a moment when you wanted to come home?" She looked out at the quiet street. "Every single day. But if I had, you would have died with me." Sometimes the hardest part of surviving is letting the people you love believe you've been lost forever. And sometimes the impossible isn't a ghost. It's the truth hiding in plain sight.